So today's guest is Clovis Nicolas, a French bassist originally from the Ivory Coast, whose career has taken him from philosophy studies to sharing the stage with legends like Brad Mehldau and Herbie Hancock. A Juilliard alumni and Ron Carter protege, Clovis has become a vital presence on the New York jazz scene with acclaimed recordings on Sunnyside Records and contributions to socially driven projects like the Healing Project. His artistry is as thoughtful as it is powerful, both on the stage and beyond. And we are live. So, Clovis, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here too.
Yeah. So, you grew up in France and later moved to New York City, the jazz capital of the world. And I'd imagine that each one sort of helped shape your musical identity. I mean, how would you say that, both places brought you to be the musician you are today?
I think when I started in France, I was already driven by American music because I was listening to jazz music. I was checking out jazz albums, and I had an awareness that it, a lot of things was going on over there. But I must say that being in France helped me. It was a nice first step to my career, because if I had started by just moving to the States when I was interested in jazz, which means around like 16 or 17 years old, it would have been a very big challenge. I think the step would have been too high. So I moved to Paris and I met a lot of musicians that knew American musicians. I even played with some of these American musicians, including Brad Mehldau. I played with Brad Mehldau when I was in Paris. And it gave me a very nice start to my career, like a professional start. I could make a name for myself at an early age, like I was 22, 23 years old, on the French scene. And I could learn a lot from all these French musicians I was playing with and I was touring with. So I learned my job basically in France. And that is what is part of my DNA in a way.
I went to France for the first time this past December and got to hear some of the musicians. And, just like anywhere else, everyone was extraordinary on their instrument. Were you going to the clubs like right when you decided that you wanted to be a pro, like remembering the first some of the concerts you actually saw people play jazz live?
Yes, I remember my three first concerts, which was Sonny Rollins when I was 14 years old. My father told me, like, you got to go see this. And I didn't know who Sonny Rollins was back then. But I saw Sonny Rollins. That had a big impression on me. Then I saw Ahmad Jamal with his trio. That was great too. And back then I was already completely hooked up with jazz music. And the last one, I mean, the third one that I saw was Johnny Griffin. And this was in a jazz club in Paris. And I was sitting like the first row. I was 15 years old and I wanted to get all of it. And I think that's the first time I really got a sense of how it feels like to play on the stage playing jazz. Back then I was already starting to practice jazz songs and I knew who Johnny Griffin was. And that gave me a very nice taste of what is jazz actually. So after that, I was always going in jazz clubs, and I must say that where I'm from, there was not really a bass teacher. So there were some bass teachers, but I didn't like the way they played, so I didn't really want to study with them. So I really studied on my own. I was going out in clubs every night. In Paris back then, there was a big scene, big night scene. Like you could go from club one to club two to club three to club four, and there was always music going on. So I would play with people, ask the drummer a question, ask the saxophone player a question, ask the piano player a question about chords. If I see a bass player, I ask the bass player questions about fingerings or things like that. But my first introduction to jazz music was self-taught. I didn't do a school. I went to school way later when I was 35 years old. But I remember I was following around this bass player, the French bass player called Thomas Bramery. I was trying to go to everywhere he was playing and ask him all sorts of questions. So that's how I learned.
When you were asking the musicians questions in Paris, were they receptive towards people who wanted to get information from them? Do you think the culture is different, in terms of, how musicians are, wanting to share information in New York, or is it pretty much the same?
I think it's pretty much the same. I think it has to do more with the personality of the musician, which means some musicians might be the kind of person who says one word. Like when I talked to the great bass player Pierre Michelot, I asked him, can I study with you? He said, no, I don't give lessons. And like, okay, so what advice you have to give for me? And he said, practice every day, including the Sundays.
Yeah.
So some musicians, they're just going to give you this one piece of advice that is very valuable. And some other musicians, you might ask a question, whether he's an American musician or French musician. He's a piano player and he's going to go on the piano and you say, oh, you can do this, you can do that, but you can also do this. And this is the intro from Cedar Walton, but I like what Keith Jarrett does. So it's not really relevant to the nationality as much as the personality of the person.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And you're still in New York. What makes, I mean, obviously, I was going to ask you what makes the scene so special, but everyone knows that. But how has the scene changed in New York since you arrived? Would you say, if you could pinpoint it?
I think it since I arrived, it got earlier and earlier. When I arrived, you could go out at midnight, 1 or 2, and there was still a lot of music happening. And there was more the sense that the music was all night long. Like now it's more like they want to get this crowd from the 7 p.m. crowd, maybe people that work the next day, so they cannot go out at 10 because the commute is too much. So they want to get this crowd. And since I arrived, like my gigs, they start earlier and earlier. Like even when I arrived, the Village Vanguard, they had 3 sets on the weekends. The set was 9 p.m., 11 p.m., and 12:30 a.m. with 3 sets. And sometimes I would go to see something else before, and then finish with the Vanguard at 12:30 to 1:30. There was a set, and that was the best set because back then only the musicians would hang there. Like if you go see Cedar Walton at 12:30, you know that all the good people are going to be there.
What year
Good
are we
people,
talking
meaning,
about specifically as far as the Village Vanguard?
That's 2002, 2005. I arrived in 2002.
Okay.
I would say 2002, 2006. Yeah, something like that.
That's so cool that they had that really late set, and you really could go from club to club to club and then finish off at the Village Vanguard. But then there are still sets that were going on even later than that, I believe.
Yes, there was Smalls that had this late set starting at 2 a.m. from 2 to 5 a.m. So sometimes I would go out and plan of spending the whole night of music, and I would start with the Blue Note at 8 p.m. and then go somewhere else and then go to the Vanguard and then finish with Smalls. I come back at home, I have my head so full of music. It's like, it was really worth it as a musician to check all this music out like that.
When you're going from club to club to club like that, it's almost like, are you just enjoying the music for what it is, or is it almost a mission to like take in the scene or take in the information, you think?
It's a little bit of both. I always love to listen to musicians, but all the musicians when I was in New York, all the musicians I was checking out were basically the musicians that I would see in festivals once a year in France. Like there's, let's say, Christian McBride trio, and then Elvin Jones quintet, and then I don't know, Cedar Walton quartet. And this for me in France was once a year, and I have to drive to the festival and drive to sit maybe in the back of the room. And here I'm in New York, and I can just walk from one place to the other to see all that. So it's like a bit a kid who is given all this candy, and he's just taking all the
What was the
candies.
first show in New York? Do you remember?
Yes, it was Cedar Walton with Peter Washington and Joe Farnsworth at Smoke.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as far as New York, we talked a little bit about how it's changed. When you do people from France, do they look at you like, as someone's special who came from there and then they went to New York and then established themselves? Do they welcome you back a little bit differently now that you've established yourself, you think?
I think when I left, they were a little bit upset because I was doing a lot of projects and I had recorded at least 3 or 4 albums that were scheduled for release. And by the time the album were released, I was not there anymore to even play for the album release.
Mm-hmm.
So they were a little bit upset about that. And some of them were very supportive. And eventually, as they saw me stay there, they gave me a bit more respect. They're like, oh, they might have thought first that he's going to go for like 6 months, 1 year, and do his New York thing and then come back. But as I was staying there and as I was playing with people in New York, they're like, oh, actually, he's serious about it. And I must say that one thing that changed in the course of my lifetime that now is taken for granted was social media. Because the first few years I was in New York, they had no idea what I was doing because there was no social media, no Facebook. So they're like, Clovis is in New York, we don't know. But
he disappeared.
When social media, yeah, it kind of disappeared. But when social media took over the internet, I started to post what I was doing, and they're like, oh, actually, he's playing in New York. So it was a very nice way to reconnect with the French scene this way.
Yeah, social media, that's another topic we could get into if you like. But I feel like it's the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative aspects of it.
Yeah.
I mean, no, go on. What were you saying? Sorry.
No, go on.
We it's almost like you have to let the world know that you exist to be relevant. You can't just be doing it just to do it these days, in a sense.
I feel this way. I feel like I have a more positive opinion on social media that most people who are going to take any opportunity to say it sucks and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, they spend the whole day on social media.
Yeah.
I see that those people, they complain about it, but they're only always on Facebook. And so for me, I see it more like a great opportunity to develop your message or whatever you are doing. And then it's up to you if you're smart enough about it and don't post things that don't really matter, or maybe for my personal taste, don't get too much political. Like I don't really want to share this information. I just want to share music, something that people can live with, like as a go away with. Like if I share a piece of music I wrote, or maybe some fingerings I found on the bass, that hey, check this one out. I think it's pretty cool to play this head, or things like that. It's a great way to do it, and
people can see your growth as a musician too. People could see how much you've grown, like over the years too.
Friend Grant Stewart was saying that nowadays people show themselves practice on social media, and that's exactly what you don't want to show. You don't want to show yourself practice. You want to show the result. The practice is for you. It's the mystery. You don't know how the music was created. You show the final result. Here is how I play. So these kind of things, I try to be aware of that. I might not show myself practice, but I'm practicing first in private, and then I show when I actually can execute the piece in public.
Yeah, I would never show myself practicing ever. That would be very strange. But everyone can do what they want to do. I also feel that personally, like the more further along you go on the journey of playing this music, you're always learning or you're always realizing how much you do know or don't know. I mean, I like to think don't know sometimes.
Mm.
Um, so what's something you believed about playing this music 10 years ago that you see very differently now? Because we're always students, I like to think.
I really like to think I'm always a student, and I'm still once in a while going to see Ron Carter for my what he calls 5,000 notes checkup. So I once a year I go see him, prepare an etude, and he points things that I'm not doing so well. So it's a long process. So I'm fine with that. Keep learning. From 10 years ago up to now, I feel I'm more or less the same. I've grown into the idea that I'm always going to have to practice and improve. I would say that maybe the priorities have slightly changed. I realized how much the importance of the feel and the time is as compared to maybe 10 years ago. I was more concerned about what chords is he playing, what lines, what's the harmony here. But now I'm a little bit more focused on how does he phrase this line that to make it so uh, relevant. So maybe 10 years ago, I would have thought, oh, I know this line. I don't need to go over it. And now I'm like, no, I'm going back to this line. I want to really know how he does it, like how he phrases it, how his posture or his or her posture is with the instrument. So as I get older, it's a bit more about the how, which I think the magic is a lot in the how you do it rather than what you do. What is the content? What is this triton substitution line? No, it's more like how does he play this triton substitution line? And so I'm more focused on the phrasing.
Um, I was sometimes I look at my instrument when I play if I'm looking at the neck of the guitar, and if I look directly at the neck, I get too locked into looking at it. But then if I look through the neck and like kind of let the neck blur a little bit, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, I'm looking in some other direction, but still looking at it. Like I can bring the level of focus in a different way just to my ears. Is there any type of situation like this that you've, encountered on the bass just by where you look in a sense?
Uh, yes, I try to not look at the fingerboard because it's very tempting to do that, and it's not going to give you any information because when you look at the fingerboard, there's no frets, there's nothing. So I try to develop a sense of my fingerboard being in my head. Like for example, like I have a bow case here. I can play F blues, and if you put the strings, it's going to be exactly a D here because it's in my head. It's like it's the blueprint of the fingerboard is in my head. So whether I close my eyes, whether I look at the window or I look at the drummer, there's this blueprint, the scale of the fingerboard is in my head. So I usually try to not to be distracted by anything. So I look in this area around me, and I try to always pay attention, almost like when I drive, what's going on the bandstand, like is what's the cue, when is the cue coming from the piano player or from the drummer, or if any.
Yeah. No, this is great stuff, and the way you described it, it's almost like it's the fretboard is it's always there. It's just invisible or something. The way you were
Yes.
talking about it, that's
Hmm.
it, which is a great point. And I want to thank you so much for speaking with me for a little bit today. It was very insightful. And where can everybody find your website, social media, all that stuff? We could share it.
So I keep my social media handle very easy to find. So I don't put a nickname. So Instagram is Clovis Nicolas without the H for Nicolas. And Facebook is Clovis Nicolas. And my website is clovisnicolas.com. And Spotify or Amazon or Apple Music, or even better, buying my CDs on my website. It's all out there. I like all of my CDs, and they're all very different. One is solo bass. The whole CD is solo bass. The last one is half jazz quartet, half string quartet, like mix of classical music and jazz. My first one is a sextet with a guitar player with Alex Wintz. Actually, maybe you might know him. I don't know.
I know who he is. Yeah.
And second one was a project around the Freedom Suite by Sonny Rollins. So I love to do albums. I love to share my music. So maybe the best way to connect with me is to listen to one of them.
Yeah. Buy one of the records. That's number one. That's how you get to know the musician. No, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.